Hey everyone. In this next part, we're going to be talking about assigning responsibilities to stakeholders. This is a really crucial part of your project. Working through and identifying the stakeholders is the first step. The second step is making sure that there's alignment in the responsibilities those individual stakeholders will have at different processes and points within the project. If you don't assign responsibilities, you run a lot of risk on the project. So it's a very good habit to get into to assign the responsibilities right away. The way that I like to use and what most people use is called a RACI matrix. And this is a fairly simple matrix that you can utilize to assign the responsibilities and ensure that everybody's on the same page, as well as it's a visual model that can be placed into your requirements documents and have it there for documentation. So the first thing is to really understand what it is. And it's a really critical tool to help you understand the responsibilities of stakeholders. So throughout a project, different stakeholders are engaged and have different responsibilities. And what the RACI matrix is designated to do is to identify those responsibilities early on in the project so there's no confusion as you move throughout the project. And it really helps set the stage for the project as you move forward. One thing it really helps to eliminate is power struggles. So one thing that the matrix does, as we get into it, you'll understand that you're able to identify who's responsible for certain elements and who's accountable for certain pieces and tasks. And by doing that and identifying who's responsible, you eliminate the kind of butting of heads. There's many times you have multiple teams, cross-functional teams that are working together on a project, and you may have two managers or directors that are, they're used to having the power, and they start having a struggle. So it's better to solve that with a RACI matrix before the project even starts than get halfway through the project and start running into issues with power struggles or a political game within the company. Another thing is kind of the exact opposite, and that's if you don't tell anybody they're responsible, or if they don't volunteer to be responsible for certain aspects, everybody assumes everybody else is going to take care of it. And so nobody ends up doing it. There ends up being a lot of finger pointing, and then the task never gets completed. And it elongates the project, which causes it to go over schedule and over budget, and it looks really bad for the business analyst. So the RACI matrix helps to eliminate that as well. And the really big thing, and kind of the reason it eliminates all this, is it sets clear expectations. Everybody knows what their role is and what they're responsible for throughout the whole project, as well as it helps make sure that the business analyst knows whose role or who whatever his roles are throughout the project. Really makes you sit back and dictate that prior to that project starting. So let's dive in a little bit and understand what a RACI matrix looks like. One quick thing, some people call it a RACI matrix. I've heard it called a RACI matrix. I've always called it a RACI matrix, and that's what most people call it. But you can call it whatever you like. RACI or RACI, it's the same concept that we'll dive in here. So what we're looking at on the screen is just an example RACI matrix. As you can see here, it's a fairly simple matrix. It's got some roles, as you can tell, stakeholders across the top. The left-hand column is your tasks. And then you kind of have an internal part with a bunch of R, A's, C's, and I's. And we'll go into details as to what that means and how you create this matrix. So the RACI comes from the letters, the acronym, responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. And what that is the different levels that a stakeholder could have in that project, whether they're responsible for it, accountable for it, they're consulted on it, or they're informed. So we'll dive into each one of these individually just to define it a little bit further, make sure you fully understand. So responsible is who is or will be doing this task. So who's going to be doing that, and then who's assigned to work on the task. Ultimately, who's responsible for ensuring that task gets completed. The next one is accountable. And this one is, I like to explain it as whose head will roll if something goes wrong, right? Who's the boss? Who's the one that will be in trouble if that task doesn't happen as according to plan? And also, it kind of comes down to who has authority to authorize that work, who has authority to approve of the work and validate that that particular task is done and correctly to meet the overall business objectives of the project. Then we have consulted, and this is somebody that's utilized as part of that task. They're talked to about that particular task, but they're not really making any decisions. They're being consulted. They're telling them, maybe they're suggesting or recommending certain ways to handle that particular task or process, but they're just being consulted on it. And they're your normal project team members as well as subject matter experts that you're going to kind of say, okay, what's the best way to handle this, or based on experience or your level of expertise, what's the best way to go? And then last but not least is informed. So this is the executives and the different management levels on certain tasks. And really what it is, whose work is depending on this task. This could be the end user, and then also who has to be kept up to date on the progress. Like I said, that could be executives or management, who needs to be told about the progress of the particular task. So that's what RACI is. It's very simplistic, and if you remember RACI, then you can pretty much rattle them off: responsible, accountable, consulted, informed. Very important that you're able to keep those four straight. So let's break down the chart a little bit. It's fairly simple, but I like to explain it up. So in the orange, right across the top there, that's where your project roles go. That's your stakeholders. And that's going to be your business analysts, your project managers, your different team members. It could be your users and executives, basically all those stakeholders that you've identified in your previous task of identifying stakeholders. Along the left-hand column, now in the orange, is the actions or the tasks. Ultimately, those are the things that are being completed: project planning, testing, requirements gathering, move to production. All those different tasks are part of that. And then in the middle is your responsibility grid. And what that is showing is, okay, now if you're looking at the certain column of that stakeholder and the row of the task, what is their particular responsibility for that? Are they responsible, accountable, consulted, informed, or none of the above for that particular task?